SABC News understands the EFF will announce drastic leadership changes at midday. Several highly placed sources have told SABC News that EFF Deputy President Floyd Shevambu has indicated his intention to resign from the organization. The second-in-command has also requested to be released from all his duties in Parliament. Let's jump straight into it. Samkele Maseko is our senior reporter joining us now live in studio for a sense of what else we know. 12 o'clock couldn't be further, quite frankly.
It's very far. It's very far. And it's very far.
And 24 hours is a long time in politics. All right, before we jump into the possible implications, what do we know around what the EFF is likely to announce come 12?
12 o'clock midday today, the EFF leadership is going to announce that its Deputy President Floyd Shevambu and others within the National Assembly have decided that they are ultimately leaving the organization. Floyd Shevambu is a member of the EFF in Johannesburg, Ward 44. In his resignation letter, it is termed that it is the best performing branch of the economic freedom fighters. But we must also know that through our several forces that we've engaged with, his membership has expired of the EFF in that particular branch, and ultimately the membership of the party has expired, and he has requested that he will not be renewing, rather not requested, he has stated that he will not be renewing his membership of the party and has requested to be released from all of his duties in the organization as Deputy President, in his deployments, and ultimately to be removed as a member of the EFF in Parliament, which will ultimately mean that is Floyd Shevambu cutting his relationship with the 11-year-old organization, the July 26 movement that he ultimately formed after the aftermath of the Marikana massacre with Julius Malema. Effectively, this is the very first Deputy President Julius Malema in his political history has served with for 2 terms as Deputy President. Remember, in the ANC Youth League, his first Deputy President was Andile Lungisa. His second Deputy President after the Congress of the ANC Youth League in 2011 at Gallagher Estate was Ronald Ozi Lamula. But in the EFF, their first NPA, in Bloemfontein, he came back, he was elected with Floyd Shevambu, the second NPA at Nasrec Expo Center 5 years ago. He was re-elected with Floyd Shevambu within that particular position as well. But the relationship between the two has been very frictious of late, particularly within the past 3 years.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you next. I mean, many people who've kind of seen our reporting on this have been taken aback. You know, it seems to have come as a shock to the public. But I wonder to what extent the writing has always been on the wall.
The writing has always been on the wall, particularly if you hang around the political circles, you hear the corridor talk within the politicians, you hear some of the discussions that take place. Floyd Shevambu has been quite unhappy for quite some time. Not only him within the EFF, many others. You look at an individual like Patrick Sindani, the former organizer of the EFF, former member of Parliament. He ultimately resigned and went to the Patriotic Alliance. He was organizing within these elections. He was left out of the list, pulled out. So many others are ultimately unhappy. Some of the sources we've spoken to have ultimately said that with Floyd Shevambu leaving, they will ultimately be leaving with him as well. You look at how the last NPA within the province of Gauteng, how those who supported Floyd Shevambu were basically wiped out of the political space within the economic freedom fighters. You go to Ekurhuleni, you come here to the former regional chairperson of the EFF in Johannesburg, Musa Novella, who was a close ally of Floyd Shevambu. They were all ultimately obliterated politically within the structures of the economic freedom fighters. So Floyd Shevambu and many others have been quite unhappy for quite some time. It's rather interesting that he has ultimately decided to pull the trigger now at this point in time. And one wonders what truly happened within the past few days, particularly around the negotiations of the government of national unity. You remember the press briefing at the results center after results, Julius Malema saying that Ratsena, no, we're entering now. We're taking the missionary, we'll be getting those blue lights and these ministries. And ultimately, a week or two later, EFF against the government of national unity. You heard what happened in the negotiations with Floyd Shevambu leading those negotiations of the EFF in consultation with the CCT and the leadership of the economic freedom fighters. And one wonders who are the many others that will ultimately be leaving with Floyd Shevambu. You've seen Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane denouncing that she would be leaving, despite many sources saying that she would be leaving. She's saying she's not. She's staying put. She will not betray the economic emancipation movement. Also, you've heard Carl Niehaus saying that, no, it's not true. He's not leaving. He's staying put. But interestingly, I got a call from one individual, Mzwanele Mani, shouting at me for using his former name, saying, Samkelo, put some respect to my name, Mzwanele. But I'm not responding to the content of your news reporting.
Okay, so it's more the how more than the what, I suppose. You know, amongst the many questions that are going to be asked is what happens next. But you, for example, are asking the rhetorical question around what could have changed over the past couple of weeks. But let's face it, the EFF has had quite a difficult time since the elections. It wasn't a great outcome at the polls, now moving to the fourth largest organization. The VBS saga doesn't seem to be going away. There is enough that could have potentially led to a rupture within the organization, if indeed that's what happened.
Let's be brutal and honest. Many of the battles within the economic freedom fighters started when they took over government. You'd remember the words of Julius Malema saying that he's seeing a lot of fighters who are like hyenas. They're salivating to get an access to the resources and the coffers of the state, particularly when they took over the metros, the reconfiguration of the metros, when Dunga took over as the executive mayor in Tshwane, when they had a foot in Johannesburg, with Mcini Mchakwe as MMCs and many other leaders of the economic freedom fighters and other municipalities. You go to eThekwini when they were heading infrastructure within that particular municipality. You go to Gqeberha in Nelson Mandela Bay. Julius Malema saying that even them taking these responsibilities, people must not want to accumulate wealth for themselves. But a lot of things started creeping in, tenders, accusations, left, right, and center. Then there was VBS, then there was Kameka, then there was Mahuna Investments, despite them saying that they've never benefited a cent from those particular collapse of that particular bank, saying they never went to solicit any bribe. They were offered a donation of 5 million rands. And then ultimately it will be political ructions internally in the EFF. You go to how they had been preparing for the elections in a province like KwaZulu-Natal, where they had their manifesto, which to be quite honest with you, their manifesto launch and their attendance in EFF standards at the Moses Mabhida Stadium was a flop, if one may put it in that particular way. Because you know the EFF to grow crowds. You know the EFF to have grown significantly in 2019 in the province of KwaZulu-Natal in those elections, getting over 380,000 votes within that particular province. Starting off in KZN had gotten about 70,000 or 80,000 votes and growing by about 300,000 in 2019. And ultimately to see that drastic drop and ultimately the calamity that happened after the elections, with them only dropping from 9% within that province to go to about 2%, to having two members of the provincial legislature, which is Mongezi Twala, the provincial chair, despite Julius Malema saying that they fought under very difficult circumstances in the province of KZN that is very vast, but ultimately they did drop. There was the Jacob Zuma factor, which now brings about the question with the political ructions in the EFF and the rumors that there are 6 others who have ultimately resigned from the economic freedom fighters. One wonders who those particular individuals are. We have confirmation of one at this point in time, Mzwanele Manyi.
Right.
Then there are rumors of many of others, and another individual within the officials of the EFF, not yet verified if that other official of the EFF has resigned from the organization. But it ultimately boils down to relationships, unhappiness of people, and the magnitudes and the others whom Floyd Shevambu may be an example of, who are unhappy, and others who have pulled the trigger, who may be seen as low-key leaders within the economic freedom fighters. I'll mention your Patrick Sindanis, who was a former organizer of the party. He's gone to Patriotic Alliance. You mention others who have deflected from the EFF. Your Vusi Kozas of KwaZulu-Natal were ultimately removed after failing to procure buses to the 10th anniversary of the EFF at the FNB Stadium. So it's ultimately a myriad of issues that Floyd Shevambu has been battling with, particularly for the past 2 to 3 years.
Soon there's going to be a conversation around who replaces him. But before we get there, how much of this do you reckon actually comes down to Julius Malema's own leadership? Because there's been all kinds of speculation, of course, around the personal relationship he might have shared with Floyd Shevambu and the impact ultimately this has had, culminating in what we're likely to hear at 12.
I'm thinking on how to answer that particular question, because Julius Malema as an individual, I as Samkelo Masego have had many interactions with him.
Right.
Very nice individual, charismatic, jovial, can have marvelous chats with him. When you go wrong with him, he'll go off at you.
Yeah.
Say, no, Samkelo, no, that's not how it works. But Julius Malema, the politician, is very ruthless. very ruthless. If you were to ask those who were in the ANC Youth League, like Andile Lungisa, particularly, wanted to challenge him in the ANC Youth League, you can see the ruthlessness of Julius Malema. You go to a Kenny Morolong, the deputy minister in the presidency, who was going to contest with Julius Malema at COSAS, the Congress of South African Students Organization. He'll tell you how ruthless Julius Malema is. You see the videos of him as a young COSAS leader in Witbank fighting with the late Jackson Mthembu.
Yeah.
And the Julius Malema that spoke out of what happened in Botswana, what was happening at just next door in Botswana, which ultimately led to his expulsion from the African National Congress. You see him when he was campaigning for the removal of Jacob Zuma going towards the 2012 conference of the ANC in Mangaung. And ultimately, when he basically politically obliterated your Andile Mngxitamas, your Khanyisile Litchfield Shabalalas in the EFF, which was one of the first actions within the EFF since its inception, and ultimately to how he dealt with those whom he says were hyenas wanting to salivate at the resources of the state. And that just tells you the ruthlessness of the man. But the relationship between him and Floyd, very complex. A complex relationship, comradely in the EFF, but command and control. Command and control is centralized around the office of the president, not the presidency. So command and control is with the president. But there may be another issue at the helm. Floyd is an ambitious individual. The negotiations around the government of national unity, who wanted what? Some of our sources say Floyd Shevambu, Veronica Mente, they were pushing for the EFF to form part of the government of national unity. Julius Malema did not want with some of the predominant leaders of the EFF, some of your provincial chairpersons, some of your CCT members were saying, no, we can't be in the same working arrangement with the Freedom Front Plus and the Democratic Alliance. And those were some of the internal issues as well that were there on how the EFF positions itself into the future, because some of them may ultimately feel that Julius Malema has led the party, formed the party, grown the party, but the party has now reached a ceiling.
Right.
It now needs a different leader to take it into its next era, post the first decade of Julius Malema. But speaking to the SABC in an exclusive interview before their 11th anniversary in Kimberley, Julius Malema, I asked him, are you available for a third term? He said, Samkelo, I am available. And anyone who will come and ask me that question, whether I'm available or not, tell them, I am available, I'm available, I'm available, and I'm available.
Quote unquote.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
Then there's the issue of Marshal Dlamini.
Yeah.
There were murmurs that Marshal Dlamini wants to contest Floyd for the deputy presidency, murmurs that Mbuyiseni Ndlozi wants to contest for the position of Secretary General of the EFF, contesting Marshal Dlamini. Julius Malema saying that will never happen. I don't see it happening. If people want to contest the SG, they don't want the SG, they must not slander him. They must come to us and tell us what is wrong with the SG, so we can go and tell the SG what is wrong with him. So it's an issue of transition within the EFF as well, but an issue of unhappiness as well from the EFF. But you can't move away from your VBS issues. You can't, and the affidavit by Chipiwa Matodzi. You can't also move away from the changing political landscape within the country, the entry point of the MK party, and how Umkhonto MK has just went ahead and just stabbed everything in its way, from particularly the liberation forces, which is your EFF and your ANCs.
Absolutely. No matter what happens at 12 o'clock, it feels like the winds of change are blowing and we're oscillating from one historic moment to another. So we'll count down, no doubt. Our visuals will certainly make sure to be fixated on the situation at the EFF's headquarters in Johannesburg.